Hi, everyone. Welcome to this special episode of Carolyn Talks. And today I am joined by my friend and director and writer, V.T. Nayani, to talk about her career and her film displays, which we spoke about briefly during TIFF. I was so bummed we didn't get as much to talk to get as long to, what am I saying? I'm mixing up my words. To get to talk
to have as much time as we wanted.
Yes. That's what I'm trying to say.
My words. I talk too fast and I think too fast with my words, and I'm always losing my words. I get it. So much in my mind.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. But you know, in the festival season, you really usually only don't get to talk to people for as long as you want. And we'll also, because it's the end of the year, and one of my Christmas traditions is watching Ever After. And BT and I are going to talk about Ever After. It's after the Cinderella with Brandy. It's the best Cinderella adaptation ever. I don't care what anyone says. So we're going to talk about that. And it's just going to be a fun chat today. And I think it's a perfect way also to end like 2022. I can't believe it. It's the end of the year already.
It's wild.
It's this year has felt like super long. Yeah. 2021 felt like it just gelled into 2022. And it just felt like one big long year that lasted 3 years. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh, right. But as usual, I usually like to start by asking my guests to say a bit about themselves. So of course, I'll just ask VT to say a bit about herself and what got her into filmmaking. And then we'll talk about what got her to start working with this place, which, as I mentioned, screened at the Toronto International Film Festival. And it was great. It's one of my favorite films of the year because I think she did a fantastic job talking about queer love, as well as identity and culture. And it's just a whole smorgasbord of interesting topics. So VT.
Yeah, my name is V.T. Nayani. Most people just know me by my given name, Nayani. And the V.T. is paying tribute to my parents. Their first names are V and T, so I wanted to honor both of them in some way. I am a director, writer, sometimes producer, depending on the project. I've been working in the industry it will be 13 years next year, which is wild because I feel like I'm still quite young, but I'm not as young as I think I am in my head. I think my spirit is young. My body feels
nothing
old.
But a number. That's
my spirit is young, my heart is young, my body feels a little bit older, but we're doing things to take care of that. I work in television and film. I came from journalism and documentary and unscripted, but I've always, been focused and had my heart set on narrative. I grew up watching a lot of television, television in the library babysat me to a certain degree. And I always was fond of and enamored by like worlds, like imagined worlds, whether they're rooted in reality or they're completely made up. I just thought it was so powerful and beautiful to be able to create a world that people can dive into and find solace in and joy in and, resonate with, or it gives them space to dream and hope. And so narrative is where my heart is. And thankfully, able to work in that space, or have the capacity to work in that space now, and interested in creating television and film that is fictional or, imagined to a certain degree, and world building. And I'm excited. Like you said, we had our first feature at TIFF this past September, and which was 3 months ago or 2 months ago. And that feels really wild to me. Like, where did time go 3 months ago? Yeah. And excited about the things that are upcoming, and to go forth and keep dreaming and creating with other folks.
Right. So you said that you started in journalism. What type of journalism were you doing before you transitioned into doing filmmaking?
Yeah, I went to school at Toronto Metropolitan University, now TMU in Toronto, and I did a journalism degree, and I specialized in broadcasting, so radio and television at the time. So I was really training for 4 years to be a reporter. Like, I thought I was going to be a reporter and be an anchor. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent. I watched a lot of rom-coms, which I think all comes back full circle. I also wanted to work for a magazine. Like, I was torn between broadcasting and magazine, and I ended up picking broadcasting. But magazine, I wanted to live in New York. I watched one too many rom-coms. I wanted to live in New York and write and be an editor of a magazine. And, I was influenced by what I was watching for sure. And I was also influenced to go into journalism, even the broadcasting side, because of the people I saw on TV. But I enjoyed writing and reading, and I thought that would lead to journalism, that would make sense. And I like talking to people, and I love having conversations and learning about folks. So I trained for that. And then I never really worked in journalism. Like I had a short doc in undergrad on colorism and shadism. And that took me to making a mid-length feature after that. And so I never really fully worked in a journalistic space, but I had decided that when I was coming out of school that I didn't want to work in the kind of 24-hour news cycle. I wanted to do longer format.
You wanted to be like Christina Amanpour.
I did. I wanted to be like Lisa Ling or Christiane Amanpour. Like that was, yes, it was either that or I wanted to be the editor of Vogue, like Vanity Fair. Like I was torn. I wanted to do either or would have been great, a mix of the two. And I still enjoy writing, and I enjoy like, column writing and essay writing. It's still something I want to continue doing. And I've, as a filmmaker, had the space to do that through different publications and platforms. And I'm grateful for that. But I wanted to travel and talk to people. And I think that like, I still get to travel and talk to people. And so that's still part of my world. And so trained journalist that never really ended up being a journalist.
I know, right? See, that's what we have like a lot. We actually have a lot in common because like the things that I went to school for, I am not doing now. Like I got my diploma in paralegal studies. It was going to be a paralegal. And I'm like, nah, life happened. And it was like, you know what? I think if I'm going to do a job that's going to stress me out, at least let me make it do a job that I can truly enjoy and that I can kind of also do on my own time. Yes, and I love traveling and I love talking with people. And that's one of the reasons that I'm a film critic, because I just love being able to talk to people and like going to the different film festivals. Yeah. And for 2023, one of my goals is to travel to more international film festivals. I haven't done enough. But
I'm going to affirm that for you into the universe.
We shall manifest it.
Yes. Yes, I believe in manifestation. I do.
Yes, it will happen. And so we're of course we're going to be talking about ever after, but like I just love when I'm able to talk to people and like discover new things that I have in common with them, and that's a way not only to relate to each other, but I just like to find fun things to talk about, because like transition, like you talk about like what rom-coms and how they make us want to pursue careers because of how they make these films make these careers seem so so fun and so exciting. And like one thing they don't ever do is talk about the mundanity of these kind of jobs. They're like, oh my God, being a color writer is gonna be like we're gonna be like Carrie Bradshaw. And you're like, there's no way you could be a color writer like Carrie Bradshaw, because like how is she affording these Louis Vuitton bags?
And these bags and Louis Vuitton shoes and living on her own even with rent control, it's still a lot. Like in the Lower East Side. New York.
Not even in Toronto, because Toronto's expensive, people. Don't get it twisted. Toronto's a very expensive city to live in.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And I think my worlds collide. I was just rewatching the Gilmore Girls show. I love Gilmore Girls. It brought me joy. And but I saw an episode because one of the characters loves Christiane Amanpour, and then she makes a guest appearance near the end of the series and the very last season, and I thought, like, here's my world colliding, like these kind of imaginary characters who are inspired by the same people who want to pursue a career just like I did. And I'm grateful, like, journalism gave me the skills. I think I was always someone who knew how to talk to people. Like I think that's my personality, is like I really hope that like when people talk to me, they feel safe and, secure to share and to have a real conversation and to hold space for each other. But, journalism provided me with the tools to do that in a structured, like intentional way. And I think it makes me a better filmmaker, to be honest, and director and writer. I think it gives you the tools for leadership in terms of relating to other people and like valuing what people have to bring to the table and share, because you can't do your job as a journalist without that. Like even with your work as a critic, you're interviewing people all the time, and like we are now, it feels like we're having a conversation, but that's the best kind of interview, right? So yeah.
And the other thing I think about journalism and being a journalist is like we have to be curious. You have to want to be like, and it's not curious in an investigative way, but you have to be like, if you see something, you're just like, oh, I wonder how this happened. And then you're like, you trade and like, you want to make a story out of it, but it starts from curiosity. Yeah. And I think as a writer of a filmmaker, and from my perspective as a viewer and audience, like you can tell when filmmakers have like genuine curiosity about the topic they're talking about, because they explore things differently and like they explore things, I think, more realistically. Because even like talking about like a lot of the films that we would talk about, like from the 90s and even the early 2000s and like the early 2020s. I can't believe I can't even say that. Like, we're in 2022, for goodness sakes. But like those kind of films, those kind of rom-coms, especially a lot of the ones set in like LA and New York in particular, they kind of have this unrealistic veneer over them. Like, it's supposed to be set in real world, but you can still tell like it's still from a very fantasy perspective. It doesn't feel real. It feels like too glossy and like unrealistic. And like for your film, I remember one of the things I think I tweeted out, and I also put it in a tweet, and I mentioned it to you where it was like, oh wow, I meet cute in Toronto. Oh, right. But it felt realistic because the setting of the world, like, because there are places that I would have been like streets that I walked down. There's that. So I know that these places exist, and they do look exactly how they look in the film. But like your film doesn't have like a fake gloss to it. It doesn't feel unrealistic. Like I see them meeting in the laundromat and in the bookstore, and I'm like, oh, this seems possible. Whereas if I watch like a film like in New York, possibly because I've never actually been to New York as well, that might be it too. But when I watch those kind of films, like I don't like the meet cutes are that kind of situation that happens. I'm like, this doesn't feel realistic. It just feels too. It doesn't feel like genuine. So like that's how we can kind of like see them as like these as like true fiction, like it's true fantasy.
Yes, yeah. Whereas like, you know, it's so interesting. Like I am like anyone who knows me knows that I love a rom-com. I love like a coming of age that's drama and comedy. You know, The Princess Diaries is one of my favorite films. I talked to Norm Wilner for his show as well, and I had told him, I was like, I'm gonna pick between 10 things I hate about you and The Princess Diaries, and you know, and it was fortunately like that I picked the 10 things I hate about you, and he had a lot to share about that. But you know, I would have picked Princess Diaries. I love like coming of age. I love family. I love like I love the intricacies, and I love that, you know, I don't think it's always heartbreak and heartache and grief. I think there's so much joy and laughter and awkwardness, and I love like when those two things collide. And it was, you know, this place was not supposed to be a love story. I mean, it was a story of friendship originally, the way I conceived of it. And with the other writers, it became a love story, which is so interesting that like me, diehard romantic, like, you know, loves love stories, didn't think of that. Like I was like, but friendship is also a love story. So that's how I also saw it at the time. But I ended up still making a love story, you know, with all the family stuff and all the other aspects of the film included. But at the heart of it is like two people falling in love for the first time, which is like, I didn't intend on it, and somehow I still made a love story.
But that's the beauty of, like you mentioned it just now. I was gonna say too, the thing is, I think, and this is also something that I find isn't really explored in, I think, in North American, but particularly American filmmaking, where they don't really explore the love relationships of friendships. Like we always talk about platonic love. I mean, and like, but I find there's not enough North American films that talk about platonic love, you know, and if they do, it's just like a side thing, and we as the audience are supposed to assume it, but they don't really actually put it. Like you can have a romantic, I think, and it has nothing to do with sexual romance or like thing, but you can have like a genuine romantic platonic relationship.
Oh yeah, I have them with friends.
Like these are people that you know, and like they're the people that if you stop talking to them for like maybe 2, 3, 4 months, that you come back and it's like time hasn't passed.
Where you left off. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So even if your film had been, even if they hadn't like gotten into a romantic relationship, I could still see it being about this love, because there are these two people that they're drawn to each other, and like they match each other perfectly that way, and it's still like a love story in that sense.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I wish we got more of those kind of stories. Like, I think that's one of the reasons I also love Asian dramas too, because a lot of those kind of like Asian dramas, they do kind of like, there's an entire series dedicated to friendships. You know, like it's just about the friendship between these three women, or friendship between men, and like the whole, like they might have like their romantic relationships, like a husband or boyfriend or whatever, but like the whole story is about this friendship that develops, and all too often, sometimes someone dies.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Situation, I'm like, come on, why is someone always ended up in the hospital? But that's a whole different story. So talk a bit now. We're talking about the love. Of the development of the love relationship between the characters in this space. So talk about that development when you were writing with the writers, and how it transitioned into being also a queer love story, because that one of the things I love about this film is like it is a queer love story, but it's like still not like, it's not set up as always, like as like you're making this whole declaration, like this is a relation, this is a
Right.
romance.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
just like, it is just is. It's just, that's just what it is. It just happens.
Yeah, that was our intention. I mean, like, writing with queer women, like two other queer women, like, it's not been in my experience, but one of our writers was falling in love and started dating someone at the time. And, a lot of people on our team were exploring their sexuality or very, very clearly, like has, for some time, like for their whole lives, like are queer women, there's a lot of queer women involved with the project. But I think before those folks even got involved, like, I think the film was just reflective of where the writers were at the time. And my original idea was that they were friends, because I think for myself, like more than romantic, intimate partner love, like, or experiences, I have always had very close platonic, like you said, relationships with my friends. Like they're some of my soulmates, I believe. And so I just thought friendship. But then, as we were writing and people's lives were unfolding, outside of the project, it became informed. I don't know who suggested it first, but Deborah and Goshen were both like, this could be a really beautiful queer love story, like between two women. And I saw exactly how the conversation went. I don't even know how, because I feel like it was such a whirlwind for us, even though it was 3 years. But it shifted. And then I know whoever brought it up, we were all like, yeah, that makes sense. We could do that. That's a different dynamic. What we were very intentional about when we decided that was that it would not be like that, their queerness would not be a source of trauma in the story. Like it wouldn't be something that's questioned or made into a big deal. Like we feel like there's so many challenging, difficult coming out stories. And if you notice, like in the film, there isn't even really a coming out moment. Like Malay tells her brother, and it's a really like fun and awkward moment more than it is like, and he's supportive, and like he actually challenges her to think like, maybe not everybody's going to respond a particular way, and so we knew it. We didn't want that to be a source of strife in their lives. Like they were already dealing with so much, as so many diasporic, like, Black POC and also Indigenous folks here are dealing with. And so why add more chaos to the fire? And like, these stories also exist. Like I have friends who've had coming out moments where maybe not everybody else supports them in their family, but there are loved ones who are there for them, and it is supportive and kind and open and welcoming. And also like, that they don't have to struggle with that. And also the idea of coming out is very, I think, Western in a particular way. Like it's very white in a particular way. Like I have a lot of friends who haven't come out. Their parents know to a certain degree, or their elders, they know. It's kind of a don't ask, don't tell, don't talk about it, but like everyone's living their lives. Like there's just so many different ways to exist. So I think coming out doesn't always look the same way. And we didn't want to make that like the point of the story. The point of the story is people are falling in love and dealing with their families. The fact that they're queer is a fact. It's part of who they are. It is their lives. They're not having some big discovery. They're both, leaning into it and experiencing it as it comes, and not questioning it, and trusting themselves and what they are attracted to, and who are they attracted to, and what feels right for them. And I wanted to see two women, I think we really wanted to see two women who are Indigenous and POC that just follow the beat of their heart. Like they're just following wherever their heart goes. And that includes like not only reconciling with their families or dealing with their fathers, but also dealing with each other.
Yeah. Like you mentioned something, and it was something I've actually been thinking about this week, where the whole process of coming out is very Western, and is very North American in particular. Because I was thinking this, because I was like, someone on Twitter, they were saying they came out to their family, and the thought occurred to me is like, back home in the Caribbean, like people don't really come out. You just literally, like if you just like start walking around, like, for instance, if someone is transgender, they'll just start dressing in whichever clothing fits their identity. Yeah. Or if someone is like lesbian or gay, like we just know, like they don't have to declare I'm gay or homosexual or I'm a lesbian. You're just like, okay, you see someone like going to like, you will hear about someone going to like gay clubs, or like if they're at a fete or a dance, like they that's like they come around with their partner, or that, or they just like just do it. But it's like, it's not a big deal
thing
for us.
Yeah, I think I had been influenced by like white media, right? Like about what coming out is. And then I was talking to friends who are racialized and come from, you know, different diasporic families and experiences. And I remember someone telling me once, like, yeah, I didn't really talk to my parents about it. Like, we don't discuss it. It's just my lifestyle and my choices and not my lifestyle, my life, my choices, you know, who I love is my business. And like, my parents, you know, there was just like an understanding that they had reached silently, which I thought was, you know, like, I, again, am not one to say there is one or another way also, you know, like, I think that like people find the way that is right for them to live their lives. And for some folks, you want to make sure that people know, and you state it. And then I've seen friends who do that. And then there's some folks who are like, I don't need that to validate my life and my relationships and who I love. And so I think I just wanted to contribute to a narrative that opens up space for like other narratives to exist, right? That it affirms that like it doesn't have to sound like or look like other stories, that this too can exist in the infinite amount of ways that people can love and experience love.
No, it's true. And it kind of ties into what you're talking about, how the film already is talking about different aspects of different types of trauma. Like there's no need to add in the
just don't want it to be like a multi-trauma drama, you know?
Right? Like we're going to be talking about racism. We're going to be talking about otherism. You're going to be talking about like the struggles of Indigenous people on their native land. You know, you're talking about marginalization. You're talking about the trauma of war, you know, because the film starts out, which I thought was very interesting. Like the film starts out with the war in the Middle East, and like the characters, which is Malai's father, like he's fleeing from war. So like, the film starts out with a traumatic experience, and like you're like, we don't need to do like this whole thing and make it all about like and making it about trauma, because I think the thing, especially for us as racialized women, like we know,
and that's also
our very existence can be traumatic.
100%. We know our everyday can be, and like that was also intentional, right? Like we chose not to include footage of war. We chose not to show there's alcoholism. We chose not to show the worst parts of that alcoholism. Like we don't need to show people our trauma for people to believe us. And I think it was jarring for some audiences that we didn't do that, both outside of our community and within our community, even in our test screenings, because I think people are used to seeing like tangible evidence that there is trauma versus the impact that's had that's more quiet. And I think that part of the film maybe made folks a bit uncomfortable because we didn't offer up the trauma on a silver plate, right? Like we weren't like, here is the war footage and here is the drunken alcoholic rage and here is like the fight between like we just didn't show that. Even the breakups, the separations between family were very quiet, I would say, you know, and I would say it is a very quiet film. You know, we cut a lot of the dialogue out that it was even in the script as first-time feature screenwriters. And we just tried to hold space for like trauma exists and grief exists, of course. And so does love. And neither has to be loud. Like both can coexist in a very, I think for a lot of us, especially in the pandemic, like so many of our moments, joy and grief were very silent and quiet because we were removed from so many people we love. Like we were behind a screen like this and community existed and had to find new ways to exist, but it's not the same, right? And I think I really wanted to make a film that was quiet, you know, and that was not offering everything up and not having to prove that our pain is real for people to believe it, whether it's our own communities or other communities. And also not add more trauma than exists already. Like this part of their life can be easy. And that's why I love the scene in the car when she, you know, comes out, you know, and I put it in quotation marks because it wasn't intentional and it wasn't this big coming out moment. She's just telling her brother about somebody she's met, and he knows that she's met somebody because she's been distant and weird. And then when she just says she, because he assumes it's a he, he goes really awkwardly, which I think he played it so well. He was like, oh, it's just like the oh is so funny. And I think we need room for levity. There are awkward moments that are funny. And if you look back, they're funny. So yeah, we just wanted it to have some levity as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like you mentioned the quietness, and that is something that I didn't notice about the film. Like the moments of confrontation aren't loud. There's no arguing. There's no slamming your doors. There's no big saying, I'm walking away. Nothing like super dramatic like that way. But like for instance, like when going to host leaves, she just leaves. Like she just tells Malai, I have to go.
Yeah, and we really wanted to make that a moment where she like sometimes it's not enough. Like you can't, I think especially as children of like BIPOC communities, like
our people can be loud. It's true.
our people can be loud, but also number two, like the other thing I think about is that we always feel like I think we can sometimes overcompensate. We feel like we have to take care of the people we love. We have to do everything. We have to tell them exactly why. Like there's a lot of like guilt we carry, I think, like, and I'm not painting a brush over everybody, but I'm saying I think that we try to take care more than others, I think, because we know what we have been through. And here are two women, Indigenous and POC, and like, we wanted them to just be able to be like, you know what? I don't have the capacity for this. Like the right to say, I don't think a lot of us feel like we have the right to say we don't have the capacity, especially as Black, Indigenous, other women of color. Like we're supposed to be resilient. We're supposed to take it all. We're supposed to handle family and love and work and school. And, and I think our viewpoint was, it's okay to say, I can't do this right now. I care for you, but I have to take care of me. And that was really intentional, because part of what I see filmmaking as and building these worlds is building a version of it that we can look at and be like, that is also possible, even if a lot of us don't feel that a lot of the time. Like that's the dreamer part of me. I want to live in a world where, the majority of my closest friends like community are Black and brown women. And I want us to live in a world where we, even with each other, can say, I don't have the capacity, and I need to take care of myself. And I have that with my friends where they're like, okay, at this age, I think I have friends where they're like, girl, like just go take care of yourself, and that's the kind of love I want to exist. So that's what we wanted to show in the film. And again, I think it's too quiet for some people, which is quite fine with me. I think it was so interesting to see the responses. I feel like our biggest audience, like positive response, was like young people under 30, even under 25, and then like elder folks over 60.
So like the people in the 30s or 40s, like they're the ones that are like, what?
They're like, it's a little quiet. I don't get, like, which I think if young people love it is a good sign, because maybe you're ahead of the moment, and but it was so interesting. I'm fascinated by responses, and but I think that if the thing that we intended is what makes people uncomfortable, at least they felt what we intended,
Yeah, no, I love that the film is quiet, and like, or like, even I think one of my favorite scenes in the film is like when going hostilities and she goes home and she has that moment with her mom, and it's this moment of resolution, and then there's this scene with the burying, like her mom shows her where she buried her placenta, and that kind of made me think of also like how so many BIPOC cultures have a lot of similar cultural touchstones, because there's a lot of other like Black cultures like in Africa and even in the Caribbean, like where we bury like the placenta, or like in Barbados we would say we bury our navel string, like you don't now we don't actually bury them, but we still keep that thing alive because it's still a reference to like our ancestry and like our cultural touchstones. Very so like I would say, anybody asks where I'm from, I say Barbados, I'm like, that's where my navel string buried, right? Like that's where it is. So when I saw that scene, it just kind of also made me think of like so many of our struggles are the same, but then also so many of the best aspects of our cultures and our identity are also like very the same or very similar.
Yeah, 100%. And we felt that like as we were sharing as writers, we're like, oh wow, I do this too, or our culture does this, or that's very similar to XYZ. And those are also the moments that we didn't want to explain, because like, again, you can see it as a woman from Barbados, you can see it and have your own relationship to that moment, right? And Mohawk folks and other Indigenous folks, and look at it, folks of African descent, like of Asian descent, like they all have some connection. So there are things that we don't need to explain. Like people were like, there's a couple of people that were like, oh, in the test screenings, you should cut the opening, it doesn't make sense. And then there are other people who are children of refugees who know that story, who are like, oh my God, the way that ties to everything else so quietly is like, we know the impact. It's just there to say, this is where this comes from, And between the airplane and the placenta, you understand where both people are coming from, or all the communities are coming from. So, there were a lot of moments like the placenta was one of my favorites. And we talked about that. We're like, we're not explaining that to people. Like if you're Mohawk, you get it and you will relate to it. And if your community has that, you will understand it in your own way. And if you don't, then you should learn.
Exactly. I was just gonna say that, like, those kind of scenes, like, there's scenes where you're not spoon feeding everything to the audience. Like, for those who aren't familiar with these these aspects of like the Mohawk or First Nations or in the Indigenous communities, if you don't know it, go and do the research. Be curious, right? I think that's another thing for me as for filmmaking. Filmmaking is it should make you curious. Like, so if I'm watching a film or a show or drama, whatever, and if something happens and I'm like, oh, I don't know about this, I think I'll go and literally
so I'm
Google
the
it
queen
at the
of
moment.
pausing and having multiple tabs and Wikipedia and Google searches as I'm like, as I'm watching. Like, I am the person who will pause to go. And so like, it's not for a mainstream blockbuster audience. I love those things. I love a Marvel movie, don't get me wrong, but it is for the people who want to take time and appreciate slowness and appreciate quiet. And I'm really grateful. Like, I feel like folks like you, critics that I've spoken to who get it, like, it's really a case of those who get it really get it, and those who don't do not. That's been my experience with this film. And it's fascinating to me because I worked on it for so many years. I'm letting go of it to a certain degree. It's living its own life. But I really appreciate speaking to, and interestingly enough, not just like BIPOC critics, but like even some younger white critics who have a more nuanced developed, I think, I believe, in appreciation and respect, are looking at it in the ways that I want. So I'm appreciative of like the people who get it.
And I think that's what it should be. You're like, I made this for the people who get it, and for those who don't get it, well, and if that's,
and I might make things in the future that more people get, and that's fine. But this one was for our communities and the communities that relate to, like, this one was for BIPOC communities and anybody else who cares to engage in our stories. And we were very clear about that.
Yeah. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because there's so many films. And this is something that, like, we've talked about before, and like so many of our friends and people like us in the film and TV community, whether it's filmmakers or as critics or journalists like me, like where we talk about, and when white people make films, they make it for them. They don't consider people like us, and they don't consider whether or not we understand how we'll feel about some racist statement, how we'll feel about the presentation of Indigenous people on TV. They don't care about, like, as women, they don't care about how women might feel about a particular aspect of a story. They make it for them,
Yeah,
100%. But they also expect everyone else to engage with it and accept it as it is, because that's their perspective is supposed to be the most widely accepted perspective.
Yeah, that's real. And and also, like, working on this film, and I know we're going to talk about Ever After, but working on this film also made me realize that how much our lenses and expectations are shaped by whiteness and what exists, what is in the zeitgeist, what exists in popular culture, what we've seen even as BIPOC communities and BIPOC audiences. Because I found that even with some BIPOC audiences, we were asked about why didn't we show the war, and why didn't we show the alcoholism, and why, to a greater degree, and why didn't. So we're almost groomed to expect our own violence and trauma. And that was really interesting for me. And it just deeply kind of, for me, reaffirmed, like, that is not the filmmaker I want to be. And I hope with more films that I make or television that I make, that people, the audience, and the appetite for what I'm trying to do will grow.
Right. So something you just said, and it reminded me of the interview I did with your composer. And because my memory is terrible, I'm here legit looking up on IMDb because I'm like, I want to remember his name, but my memory.
Kalayson. Yeah.
Yes,
I'm seeing him today, actually.
yes, thank you. I just have really bad memory. But like, one of the things like we talked about is how, like, when he was composing the score, how he has traditional music, but he used what would be considered non-traditional instruments for the music. Like, he used, like, for instance, like, he has like Mohawk music and music of First Nations people, but he uses like instruments like the violin, the guitar, trumpets and this kind of stuff. And you have that sound, but like the instruments aren't their instruments, are like what we would consider European.
Yeah, like there's a very popular like Tamil horn, and he used the oboe instead, for example. So we were intentional.
And it shows like how we as like people of color, we're adaptable. We're able to like have our identity but still be able to adapt and bringing other aspects of other cultures into our stories. Whereas like for Western and especially white filmmakers, they don't do that. And if they do, it's very in a very myopic and very, I think it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Stereotypical way. Like if you have a film set in the Middle East, like they begin the same with someone ululating in the desert. And people are just randomly standing up in the middle of the dark ululating. Like
they use the same like kind of Arabic typing, white people version of Arabic sounds. Yeah, like I think we were very intentional, but both of us did not want to play into stereotypes. We didn't want like South Asian drumming and Mohawk drumming and, you know, like call and response. Like we didn't want it to be, but we wanted it to pay tribute without exploiting, I guess, you know.
Exactly.
And so we were very intentional. We had a lot of conversations. We were very clear with each other, and it was really collaborative. Obviously, I am not a musician, so I was not making music, but you know, I think the beautiful part of how we work together is it left room for me to be part of the process because I was very clear about what I wanted and did not want, and that helped him create a space that, you know, built the incredible score that he did. And I'm so excited to work with him again. I think it was a true collaborative experience.
No, it was. And I think that's the thing. And then also like you're like, as you're talking, like I can tell that you learned from him, and you're all the people that you worked with, you learned from each other. You learned new things about each other. You learned new things about yourselves as filmmakers, and you learned about your different cultures. And I think that's what filmmaking is supposed to do is to me, I see filmmaking as any other kind of learning experience where like you learn on this film, okay, like your mistakes any mistakes means you're like, okay, I can rectify this in the next project I work on. I learned how, okay, like for instance, like a cinematographer realized, okay, I learned a new lighting trick and I can apply that to the next film. And I think the same thing applies with learning about different cultures and how you present it. Like if you do a film, one time you're dealing with a specific culture or a gender identity or whatever, and the story is about this, and you realize, okay, so this is how like the audience receives the story. This is how people from this particular community receives the story. You're like, okay, if I go forward into the next project and it has the similar, like not topics, but it has people of these communities, whether it's like BIPOC or LGBTQ plus community, you're like, I can make it better and I can apply the lessons that I've learned here. And I think for a lot of filmmakers don't actually look at filmmaking as a learning experience, because like you'll watch filmmakers for years and they keep making the same mistakes. I can talk about Avatar, but I won't. But like Avatar is an example of that, where like James Cameron has been making films for like 40 years, and you're like watching these films, and I'm like, have you learned nothing? Like you have this external community, but as a storyteller, have you learned nothing in 40 years?
In 40, yeah.
In 40 years? But like that's the thing. But like that's why I'm glad like to be able to speak like to filmmakers like you, because I can tell that you're learning and that you're genuine, and like you're also looking forward to working with someone like Kalation, where he learns from you and you learn from him, and that I think just makes the story better, and it just also makes it better for us as the audience to see, because we're like, I can fully enjoy, and like in the next project I'll know this is not going to be a whole story about trauma. I realize yes, it may have like traumatic elements of like cultural identity, where because unfortunately that's the world we live in. But I know like if it's a love story, I'm like, I will fully embrace and know that this is a romance coming my way. And there will be a meet cute that I have yet to experience in Toronto, but at least someone has it.
I'm glad that it gave people a meet cute moment. You're not the first person to share that, which is like so nice for me, again, coming from the movies that I grew up.
yeah, I was like randomly bumping into someone in the library. How does that happen? How sweet. In a Tim Hortons, does that happen? Do people have meet cutes in Tim Hortons? I don't know, but I think this is also the perfect transition to talk about Ever After, because Ever After basically is a story about a meet cute, the best meet cute in history, Cinderella's story. Because in this one they have a meet cute, and he's running away from horses or whatever. We'll get to that. But we like V.T and I, we decided to talk about Ever After because it's just like one of the most romantic stories ever, and I've seen it multiple times.
Yeah, and I love Drew Barrymore. Like I'm a big Drew Barrymore fan. I still am. I love her talk show. I think she's really cool. She's willing to like not take herself seriously. Like, you know, I mean, I know she comes from a Hollywood family, and that's a whole different conversation. But I think I grew up like I love The Wedding Singer, you know, Never Been Kissed is interesting now looking at a lens as an adult, but and very problematic. But at the time, like, you know, I just loved her acting, you know, and I think Ever After, she had an amazing run there. And she was, you know, like this like darling of rom-coms, you know, and relatable in particular ways. Like, it's so strange to say that this like white woman from a Hollywood family is relatable, but I felt a resonance with her, me personally, based on my emotions and who I am and how emotional I am, and heart on my sleeve kind of person at the time, especially. And I loved it. I mean, I love, you know, I think it's such an interesting take. Like you mentioned, the Brandy Cinderella is like special in a way that can't be topped for, I think, Black women, any young women of color. Like, we just like, especially because Brandy was the princess of that time too, you know, already with Moesha and her music. And so it was such a special movie. And I think this one, in terms of white Cinderellas, is my favorite white Cinderella. I think that she also had so much agency. And even in the end, like, she still stuck to her guns. Like, I love that she didn't give up herself, that she was honest when she had to be. She didn't wait around for him. Like, you know, I think even in the end, she fought for her freedom. Like, she's just a badass, you know, the way it kind of touched a little bit on class, you know, like she was protecting the workers that she was working with in the family who used to work for her family. And like, you know, I think there was something, it's not obviously like a revolutionary movie, but it did try to speak on things that in subtle ways or smaller ways that we don't really often see in a Cinderella story. And Angelica Houston obviously is classic, you know, like, what can you not say, you know, but also like we were introduced, or I was at the very least, like introduced to like Melanie Linsky, and like, you know, there were other actors that I'm like, incredible, phenomenal actors. So it was such a great cast for this kind of movie. And I loved it. It was visually, the cinematography, the makeup, the wardrobe, all of it.
It's so good because it's a 1998 film. So like this film is like, oh, this film is over 20, like this film is almost 25 years old, I think. And I rewatched it this morning, and like, not that I'm old, I rewatched it multiple times, but I was watching with a more clear eye this time because I was paying more attention to the dialogue. Like, and like, yeah, you said that the film mentions, it talks a lot about classism. It talks a lot about, I think, also about the use is a monarchy if it's now actually helping the people. And I think they do it. And this film is written by Susanna Grant, Andy Tennant, and Rick Parks, and it's directed by Andy Tennant, a male director, which is something I never paid attention to when I was younger. But it's like, I think it's amazing to me, like, this being one of my favorite romantic films was directed by a white man, and like he pays, and again, he's being one of the co-writers, he pays, I think, a lot of attention to like the struggles of women in class in status, and also the struggles with regards to women in society as a broad concept, but then also in family dynamics. Like, he talks about family dynamics in a way that I don't think we see even now in 2022, where like, if you have like the stepmother and the stepchildren, like he talks about it in a very realistic way, where like and being older, I can kind of see where Angelica's character is coming from, because like she's like a woman who married this man, and she's marrying him to protect herself and her two daughters, and then he just ups and dies, and she's left here to raise a child that she doesn't know in a country that she doesn't know, and has a whole household to run. But there's something, I think, very nuanced in Angelica's performance, where and this is something that I always noticed even when I was younger, where when he dies and he turns to Danielle and he tells her, "I love you," that's where you can tell that's where the switch flipped for her. And this is where like Angelica Houston is such a fantastic actress. Like, so much of her performance in this film is nuanced.
Yeah, there are moments where you feel for her, like you do. Excuse me, you really caught it, like where you see it in her eyes. I mean, she's a phenomenal actor. She's an OG in her, you know, profession for a reason, but it's just so nuanced in some ways. You know, even like Drew Barrymore's, you know, character, like, you know, pushing Henry and asking him and, you know, questioning him and making him consider, you know, again, not like a big revolutionary movie, but even those subtle moments of questioning and he's not just a prince to aspire to. Like, what good is your princehood if you can't make changes and impact lives of people? And do you even think about the people whose lives you impact, you know? So I really like, it's so special. You know, I was like looking before we chatted, and I have it saved and open. Like, even Roger Ebert was like, his critic review said, like, the old tale still has life and passion in it. Like, you know, even Ebert, right? Like, you know, even like, you know, even I think it has 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, most critics were like, this, you know, you don't expect that of a Cinderella story. Sorry, you just don't. And there's been many. We know there are countless Cinderella retellings. So for a film to even, a Cinderella story to even have that level of critical response, I think, which you kind of, I think a lot of studios probably expect when they make a Cinderella movie, they're not going to get the biggest critical response, but the audiences will come and watch it, so they will make money, you know? And I think that says something. And just the fact that so many people love it and rewatch it. Like, I love critics. I think criticism as care is like a possible thing, and I want to see more of that. And at the same time, like, there are just movies that we all love that critics hated, but we all love it, you know, like, and they are great.
As a critic can say, like, sometimes when I see reviews from other critics, I'm like, what are you people talking about? Like, what?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I remember, I mean, not to bring it back there, but like, you know, The Princess Diaries has 49% on Rotten Tomatoes, right? But like, it brought us back Julie Andrews. The magic of the chemistry between Anne Hathaway and Julie Andrews was like undeniable as her grandmother, you know, and it's a people's beloved film, right? So I think Ever After is like that, with the critical response that was good, is that it's just so beloved in people's hearts, and it offered us, there's only so far you can kind of shift the Cinderella narrative, but it did that while also staying true to what it is, and giving us a different option. And I think it resonates with folks. And I think there's something so wonderful about Drew Barrymore. Like, her character with the actor who plays Henry, I'm trying to remember his name.
Dugray Scott. He's so handsome down here.
He's such a great, so good. Their chemistry was amazing. And like, but like, I think Drew Barrymore has this quality to her as a person and as an actor that you can't help but smile, you can't help but laugh. Like, she reads so genuine on screen, regardless of who she's playing, and especially at that time in her younger years. Like, it's why people love The Wedding Singer, why they love Never Been Kissed. Like, you know, I think, stories aside, her as an actor in her characters, you just feel like she makes you feel like it's you know, and I think it resonates with people. So I just love it. Like, I want to do that for Halloween one day. I want to wear the sparkles on my face and have the wings, and have that dress was beautiful. The costume design, the casting was amazing. Like, the set design, you know, Leonardo da Vinci, like all of it.
The inclusion of Leonardo da Vinci was such, I think, an unexpected moment. On unexpected reference, but there's little moments. I love how they use this film to pay attention to actual history, like the scene where Henry and Danielle they meet in the dilapidated building. Like, he talks about after the war, and he's referencing the 100 Years' Wars, and that was a war that started from the 13th century and ended in the late 14th century, which is where the film is started. So it's referencing actual history and referencing how, like, things like the war changed their country and changed their economy. And then mentioning Leonardo da Vinci and like how his own background as being he called himself a bastard son of a peasant, where like, this is another thing the film is talking about. And this, I think the whole Cinderella story is talking about, like, it doesn't matter where someone comes from, you know, it matters who they are as a person, like what they do with their life and where they end up. And like, and they use Leonardo da Vinci to show, I think, in a very smart way too, and a very subtle way to show, like, you have this man that came from like a very, very poor background, and also one where he would have been shunned, because like a man, a child who came from an unwed mother would have been basically almost a pariah in society at that time.
And also showing her best friend, who is a younger reflection of Da Vinci himself, you know, and like, I think it was just brilliant, like, in very specific ways. And it grounded in a reality, even just like not having grounding it in, like you said, reality in France at that time.
And everybody had an English accent, but
except that everybody had I was just gonna say that, aside from which is still a Hollywood movie and it's still American, you know, Aside from that, like grounding in a particular time and like not making it about magic or magical realism or anything, just like her mother's old dress and these wings, and this artist comes to help, and like just like the magic of artists and the potential that they show us, like in Da Vinci, like he came to help her, you know, he helped her get ready. This man also, like, you know, this notion of like this young woman is being helped by this elder man to like, you know, not Leonardo is her fairy godfather, you know, in essence, right? This artist who understands the world in a way that none of them understand, and they could all learn from him, and they all love to parade with him and show him off, but they don't actually listen to him. And even Henry doesn't listen to him, you know, in the end. And, you know, eventually does, but he doesn't for a while. And I just love that, like it can just be an elder in your community that you meet, who you connect with, who can help you have that moment. It doesn't have to be this magical fantasy, you know, it's just people helping people too, you know, who see something in you.
Right. And then and like as we were talking about like the best friend, I just legit just thought of it, like where like we talked about, like we were talking about how Leonardo came from a very poor background, and he came from almost being like would have been shunned in community and became the most famous artist in history, in human history. Like we still talk about him now in the 21st century, and like his artworks are still standing, and he's still revered as an inventor and a mathematician and an artist and all that. And then I just was thinking about her friend, and how her friend is literally introduced covered in mud. Like that's, and I think that's such a very subtle form of storytelling, where you have like these visual cues and telling you where her friend starts out covered in mud. He's looked at as
and
less than anything.
And she's down to roll around too, right? Like,
right, and like they're both covered in mud. And at the end, she's married to the prince, and her friend is being recognized as an artist by Leonardo da Vinci, of all people. So like it talks a lot about the evolution of people when you have people who support you. If you have people who can bring you up and who can support you and like show you your value and your worth, like you can start from the lowest of the low and like become like, and it has nothing to do with like elevating status, but it just shows you like what's it? There's a saying where there's this Chinese saying, you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, but it's kind of like the same thing where, you know, you say you can have the most beautiful gem out of a piece of rock, something that looks like a piece of rock, right? And like the film is talking about the beauty of like just believing in people, and you can seeing the beauty of people no matter what their exterior looks like.
Yeah.
And I just love Ever After. It's like even just talking about it, just thinking more about it, this film has layers.
I know. I'm like, I gotta watch it again.
Like, I'm glad I rewatched it this morning, because just like, and even like you talk about the costume design. I think the costume design in this film is stunning. Like it's so beautiful, and it's so, her dress isn't like the blue fantastical dress we know from like the stories and from like the cartoons, and even like Brandy's Cinderella. It's just like this white dress, and it's a dress that was passed on from her mom. And her shoes are also practical, people. They were practical and accurate to the time, but like, you know, that it's kind of glass slipper, because like when he's on the battlement and he's standing there and the rain starts to fall, you hear the rain fall and it's like tinkling, you can hear that it's crystal. And I just love those little touches in the film. Like the film references like the actual story in such a small way, like beginning with the brothers Grimm and her granddaughter. And I love also that the film starts with her granddaughter telling the story. She's like, I'm gonna tell you the real story. I'm not gonna let you two come up with your own idea of the story. I'm gonna tell you this is the reality. And it ends up with her saying, it doesn't matter who they became. Like the point is that they lived and they loved. Which I think is just like, that's the whole point. Is like, the point is that they loved and they had an impact. It doesn't like, it's not about making it into this fantastical story.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it. Like now the scenes are playing in my head again.
It's so good. And like the thing, and like even like the thing that made us want to start talking about this is like, so like I was tweeting about the scene where he proposes to her, like to me one of the most romantic scenes. And I think the fact that the scene comes after she rescues herself, like he thinks he's coming there to rescue her, and she's like, oh,
and
no,
he has to admit that. Yeah, he's right. Like, he has to admit his like assumption and his stupidity, like in that moment.
Yeah, he's like, oh,
his bravado, his machismo, you know, like he has to be like, well, apparently I didn't need to do that.
Like I didn't need to make this big dramatic entrance. Like you were already doing it for yourself.
Calling her by her name and admitting he was wrong, and like all of that is so wonderful because you don't see it as often.
No, you don't. And like the fact that he still proposes to her after this moment where, like, for I think in a lot of films and a lot of stories, whereas he's the male protagonist and he's like the prince, and he's like supposed to be like this big man, like he's a rescuer, you know, like princes are in fairy tales in particular are they're the rescuers, they're the man there to save the damsel in distress.
Yeah.
And he's still like realized, oh, okay, you didn't need me. He's disappointed. Yeah, he's disappointed, but he still is able to step outside himself and say, I still want to marry you. Like, I make the most romantic proposal ever. He's like, I see you as you are, and put the shoe on her feet. And the fact that he didn't have to go around trying out, that never made sense, even to me as a child. Like, how would you not know who this shoe belongs to? Why are you putting this shoe on random people's feet?
And it could fit random people. If it's a certain size, it's going to fit random people. You know what I mean? Like, and she's wearing a sock when he puts it on, like just all of it.
It's so good. And like, and the line, I think the dialogue is really, really well, because like there's this line by Angelica where Daniel asks her, for one moment, did you have any measurement of love for me? And
the pebble, the rock.
Yeah, I thought that line was so good. Where she's like, how can someone love a pebble in their shoe? That line gave me chills. I was like, wait, but that line is so good.
Like shade, so rude, but also like in her face, she's playing as like it's so much more complicated than this, you know?
Yeah, she's like, how can I love a pebble? I'm like, you know, that's like a literary masterpiece right there.
Yeah. And so the way she delivers it, so good.
Yeah, it's so good. Like Angelica Houston,
so good.
She's amazing. Like it's so honestly, Ever After really is one of the best romance pictures ever. Honestly, I think more directors should go and watch Ever After and learn.
Just even the production it's just how the elements all come together to serve the purpose of this grounded love story. I think it's a wonderful example of how lighting, camera, production design, art direction, dialogue, performances, costume, makeup, like, you know, it just comes together, set, like, you know, the builds, like it just comes together so beautifully. And everything complements each other so well. Such a tight, cohesive unit, it feels like, that made that film what it is. And everybody that was involved was immensely talented. Like that's what it feels like. And it doesn't happen very often, you know, and I think for this genre and that type of movie, for a love story, it's quite a feat. It's a feat.
Yeah, and I don't think there's been any film quite like it since then. I think it is really genuinely one of a kind, because it like again, talking, I think this is something that has to be kept talking, and not only because of this film, but also I think if you look at filmmaking in general, a lot of the different types of stories, like we've seen how many iterations of these Disney fairy tales being made, even up till today, up till now, where they're remaking all of them, but none of them really have any narrative depth to them. Like none of them are giving like actual,
like it's whimsical, it's ground. Like I don't know, Ever After is so special because it's equally both grounded and whimsical, and that's really hard to do, right? Like when they're walking on water, or she's just in the river, or Da Vinci's in his little devices, like it's just so special. Like, you know, when they're in that dilapidated building that he wants to turn into a library, a university, and when the break, like when she comes into the ball in that outfit, like I think anyone who has seen that image of her coming in is seared. Like it's so perfect. So there's and then it's matched by a very grounded, real moment afterwards, right? And I think that's what makes it so special, is that it's like both entirely whimsical and beautiful and of another world almost, and still happening in this world, you know?
She doesn't turn because the clock strikes midnight and the magic stops singing. She becomes like disillusioned because her stepmother has found another way just to embarrass her and ruin her moment. This was her moment. This was literally what we would add the way she rips
the wings, like
right, like she it's literally her Cinderella moment. And her stepmother just rips her wings. And like we say, like, you know, when you use the phrase that clips someone's wings, like
she literally clips her wings. She this liberatory kind of experience, this freedom in her mother's dress, right? Like just the levels.
Like the level, like there's so much context in that one scene. Like this woman that she was because even after everything that she's been through, the 10 years of working as a servant in a household that she owns, that's her own home. She
and Andy Tennant himself, the director, like he's no small guy, right? Like he did Ferris Bueller, he worked in the Wonder Years, like I have it all open, and then he wrote like It Takes Two, you know, Fools Rush In, like Sweet Home Alabama, like Hitch. He's not removed from, you know, these kind of like feel good, layered, complex, like drama, comedy, romance kind of in between, right? I think he also worked on Grease, like it's a very interesting history.
Yeah, very eclectic filmography.
He was a dancer in Grease. But anyways, like, you know, I think I encourage everyone to watch it. When people laugh at me, like my best friend just did before we got on this call, like I'm not ashamed to love these things. They keep my spirit young. They keep me believing and have faith and find joy. They provide solace. I can return to them. And I think there's so many marks of a great film. Sometimes they have an impact. You can never watch it again, but you'll never forget it. You know, it's too intense to watch more than once. Like sometimes a lot of times it's the movies that you can keep coming back to, that you can watch anew, or it provides comfort. You know, there's a reason why people watch Home Alone every Christmas, right? Like, again, amazing filmmaking. If you look into like how it was made, a whole different story. But, you know, I think in this case, it's that nostalgic, like comfort, joy. You know, when you watch it, you're going to feel good. It's a nice ending. It feels real. And you can't help, I don't think it could ever get old. Like it's just got this timeless quality to it that, you know, I could watch it with young folks now, and I think they would find some beauty in it. And it's because it's not set in the present, it's that kind of period is always going to be period, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think I just love it, and I will always return to it. I don't even know how many times I've watched it at this point. And I'm very grateful for films like that. They bring joy into my life consistently, and they bring a kind of comfort and ease that I think we all need in this world.
No, I agree with you completely, 100%, because it is one of those films that I can rewatch. Like one of the, like, well, as you were talking, it made me think of how like your film and both of them have like similarities where they're both about romance, and they're also both about friendship, because like Danielle has a friendship with she builds a friendship with Leonardo da Vinci, and she has like her best friend, and these are friendships built on mutual respect and like similar love for like nature and art and whatever. But then it's also like talking about trauma, but in a very soft way. Because like Danielle, she has trauma of her like of feeling abandoned. Like, you know, like this woman has treated her horribly for like 10 plus years, but she still holds on to the hope and that this woman could find some way to love her, because she can't bear the thought of losing another parent, losing another parental figure. You know, like she does everything she can. When Maurice, one of the house workers, is so loved, like she does everything she can to get him back, you know. And like she talks, and like the film talks about trauma, but in a very soft and a very smart and subtle way. And just as time, there's similarities in these kind of films. And like this is another way that I think that filmmaking is a way for people not only to relate to each other, but just also to think about the world differently, and like just to like realize like a lot of us do have like similar stories, but our similar experiences without even realizing it. And Ever After is just like, it's just such a soft and feel good moment, and one of the best feel good moments ever is that she gets her retribution in the end, but it's a way that works for her, you know. Like she doesn't have to become the bigger person where she says, I forgive you, stepmother, go on about this. No, I'm after this one, I'm not gonna think about you forever for the rest of my life, but I'm not gonna forget all the ish that you put me through for 10 plus years. You will still face consequences for this, for what you've done to me, and I will treat you. She's like, I will literally treat you the way you treated me, which was like you treated me like a servant that you considered less than, and therefore henceforth that's going to be your consequence. That's going to be your punishment.
100%. Yeah, I love that moment.
Like, yes, she got her comeuppance.
Redemption. So good.
you know?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to talk about it. I just love it. Like when you asked me, I was like, yeah, let's go. Let's do this. And like somebody wants to talk to me about Ever After. Absolutely. Like I feel like I've had a great year just like being invited to talk about Ever After and 10 Things I Hate About You. That's very on brand and in alignment with my spirit. I'm so happy.
Listen, I will admit 10 Things About You is not one of my favorite films. But the thing is also like both those films is from the same era of TV of film. Yeah. Like they both come from this, and this is just something that isn't that I talked to someone about recently, where like we haven't had these kind of films about young, well, not young love, but like love where people have like, it's difficult, but it's realistic love, but it's also a love where you're just like, this is a film that I can see myself watching 20, 30 years down the road. Whereas like, so a lot of the films made now is like, this is supposed to be a romance. Where's the romance?
Yeah, 100%.
No?
Versus like, you know, like in 10 Things I Hate About You, not to go down that tangent, because I know we only have so much time, but well, you know, the thing about that movie is like you said, like when she's like reading her poem or, he's talking to her in the party, like they're all real circumstances, you know what I mean? And then there's like an over to the top gesture that does happen. Like people do big gestures, but most of the film is like, yeah, that's two teenagers at high school who don't get along, who then start falling for each other. This is real, you know?
It happens. Well, I went to an all-girls school, so I'm not really sure about that. But I've heard from my sister. My sister went to a mixed school. I went to an all-girls school.
Yeah. Okay, there's a difference.
But that's also reality. Like people form relationships in school, and like some of them continue on into adulthood, and some of them don't. But I find like some of the films now, they don't feel timeless. Like there's some of the, we haven't really had an era of romance films like we had like in the late 90s, early 2000s.
No,
like
not at all.
Haven't had that in a really
and I just time. Like, you know, to cap it off, I just love at the end where he goes to her stepsister, the mean one, not the nice one. And even this like Melanie Linsky's like character, like the being trapped within like having to follow suit with your mother and not feeling like your mother is right is so real too. The way she plays it, like she tries to help her, she tries to be, you know, give her advice that's well-meaning but not helpful, you know. And when he goes, you know, Marguerite, I don't believe you've met my wife. Mm-hmm. And it's just like these moments, and I don't know, I love it. I want everyone to watch it. Try to open your heart up to a movie like that. Like, you know, I think people who hate it are like, I think cynical. Not to blanket statement everybody, but like, guys,
but how could you not love it?
The magic of it.
Yeah. Ooh, and we're gonna wrap it now, but you mentioned like Melanie Linsky, and like I think one of my favorite moments of the film, and it's a very, very small, subtle moment, but it's again another real world reference where like the moment, you know, like when they're trying to keep the secret of like Henry going to look for Danielle and she begins to close the door. I'm like, that's the Mona Lisa moment right here. I'm like, it kind of makes you think,
I didn't think about it that way, but you're right. Yeah, it is.
Like the expression on her face, and then it's like she's wearing like the
something hidden. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's Mona Lisa, and it kind of made me always think of like, was Mona Lisa inspired by Jacqueline? I'm like, it would be so cool if you think about it that Leonardo he created this.
Oh my God, I never thought about that. You're the first person to put that in my head. Now I'm going to rewatch that scene, but you're right. It's just like she knows a secret that everybody else doesn't, which is the joke about the Mona Lisa, that she's in on something that the rest of us are not, right?
Yeah, so I'm like, and I kind of also like, we're saying like how the film kind of elevates people in a way, like people who've been ignored by society or the people around them, like they're more important than they're given value for. And like for Jacqueline, if like she's the Mona Lisa, like her mother and sister didn't value her as a person, you know, like they ignored her, mistreated her, and then like lo and behold, Leonardo da Vinci created the most famous masterpiece based off this person that you ignore for most of your life. So I think it was just cool.
True. Oh my gosh, I never thought about it. Thank you for that.
So we're gonna wrap up now, but thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. It was such a joy speaking with you about this and just like filming.
Like I love talking with you about this place and also Ever After, and like the similarities. Who knew? There was like all of these. I just love being able to talk to people, and this is like the perfect way for me to end off my year, because you're literally my last interview podcast chat for
I'm
the
so
year.
honored. I really, honestly, I was like, I've canceled everything this week because I've been under the weather. You know, I just wrapped on a project that I can't talk about yet. But like, you know, I was like, this is the one thing where I'm like, no, we're gonna talk about ever after. I'm gonna talk to Carolyn.
Yes, and I appreciate that. I'm honored
Thank
that
you.
you took the time to speak to me about that. And so before we wrap it, tell the people where they can find you and find your work, and where they can find information about this place. Is it on your Vimeo? Do you have a Vimeo?
No, it's we're working at the distribution details, but it should be out next year in Canada and other territories to come. So we're on Instagram and Twitter for the film at This Place Film, and all the updates will come through those channels or through myself. I'm _9, like the number 9, and then Knee, Nayani, so people say my name right. And yeah, I think I'm mostly on Twitter and Instagram. All the updates come out there, but it will be available in Canada next year. Details to come. Excited about that. And then hopefully available worldwide in multiple territories as well. So more to come.
Forward to it being distributed, so because I want more people to watch it, and I think especially for a lot of Canadians, especially for a lot of Torontonians,
yeah,
they'll have fun like looking at locations and be like, oh wait, I have fun, like some, like for some reason, but I've been there, I've walked down that alleyway, I've seen that mural, so that's kind of fun for me. But I think it's also an important lesson, I think, for a lot of people. Like we talked about this in our interview during TIFF, where a lot of people don't have a full understanding or an idea of how like marginalized First Nations people are treated in Canada. Like they don't understand, like a lot of like First Nations people are still very much marginalized, and it talks about that. And then also I think it gives a realistic perspective of what immigration is like in Canada, because like people come to Canada and they think it's going to be all sunshine and rainbows and easy sailing, and it is not. Being an immigrant in Canada is not easy, and the film touches on that. So I hope more. I can't wait for it to get distributed and for lots of people to see it. And I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to share it. I'm excited to talk about movies like we just did. Like I love film and television, and I'm very like grateful that I get to be an artist who gets to talk to people like you and also make movies and film and talk about movies and film. Like life is good.
It is. And like you're gonna have, I think like you say, you can't talk about the new project that you just finished wrapping up, but I know that you're gonna have a fantastic career. And I can't wait for us to talk in 2023 to see what else you'll be doing. And that we'll definitely have to talk about another film, maybe 10 things I hate about you. We can do a breakdown of 10 things I hate about you.
Oh, I have a bunch of films if you want to talk about it. I have a list. And yeah, like, you know, I'm working on my first television series and some other film projects. So it's exciting. It's a good time. And I will always love to talk to you about everything.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thank you.